Elephant given to Beatson, then to Fairfax. Fairfax, the brilliant Eastern Suburbs fullback is in. Welcome to Leichhardt Oval in Sydney and the 1978 Amco Cup final between St George and Eastern Suburbs. Hello there, I'm Ray Warren, and a very warm welcome to you, watching us right throughout Australia and in fact in New Zealand, the 1978 Cup final. Yes, we've come to the big night of the year, when of course we'll see the Dragons of St George opposing the Roosters of Eastern Suburbs. It's quite a delightful night in Sydney for this time of year, quite a strong breeze blowing away from the grandstand end, and quite a big crowd here at Leichhardt to witness the 1978 and in fact the fifth playing of an Amco Cup final. A near capacity crowd banking onto the hills on the scoreboard side, and of course the grandstands here at Leichhardt also filled to capacity. Tonight, combining the team prize money of $60,000 for the winners and $17,500 for the losers, plus the players' awards and viewers' prizes, will be distributing between now and the end of tonight's telecast over $100,000 in prize money. So let's now have a look at the way that these two sides made this memorable occasion at Leichhardt in 1978. The St George side, seeded through to the fourth round, defeated Newtown 35-11, the quarter-final defeating Parramatta 27-9, and the semi-final against Cronulla 21-7. Eastern Suburbs also seeded through to the fourth round, defeated Western Suburbs 16-10, the quarter-final over the mighty Illawarra side 18 points to 4, and the semi-final defeating Manly by 14 points to 2. And so now let's have a look at the team rundowns. There's the St George side, identical to the one you saw defeat Cronulla in the semi-final, and leading that side again tonight, the man who really left a stamp on the semi-final, number 8, the lock forward, Rod Reddy. St George, of course, coached by Harry Barr. In the meantime, Eastern Suburbs have not been blessed with as much luck. Out of the side today, failing their physicals, at lunchtime, Arthur Beatson and Ron Coote. Now here are the changes, and the rearrangement is on your screen. Kevin Stevens moving to lock in place of Coote. Fulton at captain now moves into the 5/8 spot in place of Stevens, and Alan Power moves into Fulton's spot at centre. Grant Hedger comes into the reserves with Arthur Beatson's withdrawal. The referee for tonight's match is Jack Dancy, and the fifth Amco Cup final will be underway in just a few minutes' time. Past winners in 1974, inaugural year, the Cinderella story, Western Division. In 75, they took out the double crown, Eastern Suburbs, and in fact they have the best record of any team in the Amco Cup. In 76, it was the year of the Tiger, when Balmain defeated North Sydney, and in 77, who'll ever forget the memorable Cup final when the Magpies knocked over the Roosters by that mere 1 point. 78, well, that's a question mark. Joining me on the commentary team tonight, our regular co-commentator Keith Barnes, a former great rugby league footballer, and joining us tonight, the most famous rugby league commentator of all, and doing his very first Amco Cup telecast, and in fact his very first television co-commentary, none other than Frank Hyde, and it's great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Ray. Nice to be here.
Well, Frank, you've seen a lot of league in 1978 and a topsy-turvy year. How do you see this one going?
Well, if you have to go for somebody, I go for St George. And I do that because they have a singleness of purpose tonight. That's the only thing they have on their mind tonight, and that is the Amco Cup final. Whereas Eastern Suburbs have a couple of other things, as you are well aware, on their mind. The match next week against Manly on Sunday. And in addition to that, there's a little bit of age in that Eastern Suburbs side, experience, I agree. But with Harris and Fulton and O'Reilly in there, I think they're going to be hard put to keep out this young and energetic and virile side, St George, tonight. I think that the four quarters will assist them, but whether it will be enough to sway it Eastern Suburbs way, I doubt.
Keith Barnes.
I can't predict with any degree of confidence whatsoever, but I'm leaning the opposite way. I'm going for Eastern Suburbs. I think their style is well geared to Amco Cup football. I think their tactics are good. I think they've got a little bit more flair in the back. Certainly there's age there, but there's a bit of brilliance too when you consider the likes of Fairfax and Bobby Fulton in the 5/8 spot, and of course the current superstar leader in Kevin Hastings. I think their forwards are a tremendously good defensive unit, and I think if any problem's going to come from St George, it's going to come down the middle of the field. But there's 6 tacklers in there from Eastern Suburbs, and it's going to be a tremendous clash.
I go for St George. I think they've hit the type of form that took out the 77 premiership for them at the right time as far as Amco Cup football is concerned. A scintillating performance last Wednesday, quite a reasonable performance at the weekend, and I favour St George very, very narrowly. The kick-off to the 1978 Cup final, brought to you through the O10 network by Amco, the makers of Bogarts and Australia's largest jeans manufacturer. Placing the ball at centre field, Bob Fulton. As this big crowd now starts to warm to what they're about to see over the next 80 minutes. Electric atmosphere, a sea of red, white and blue and red and white. As Danzy calls time on, and Fulton strikes his ball down towards the grandstand end, and that sets the 78 Cup final in motion. And here's Carney coming away towards the 22. And it's Eastern Suburbs with the superstar leader Hastings now getting possession from the St George side. The Roosters immediately onto the attack, but it's O'Reilly losing it, and Jeffries has possession for St George. Jeffries playing it back to John Jansen, and Jansen, who had a very big start to the game last Wednesday night. His performance tapered off a fraction in the second half, but undoubtedly Harry Bath will be looking to him for a big one tonight as the ball floats along the back line, and luckily that was picked up there by Robert Finch for St George. This is Trudgett. Played back to Reddy. George Grant, the goal-kicking prop forward from St George, out to the 22, taken around the legs by Bobby Fulton, skippering the side tonight, and Reddy puts the boot to it, going down towards Russell Fairfax, and it's bouncing end on end inside the 22. Fairfax is back inside his own 22 line, but he has Schubert with him, draws the defence, gives it to Schubert, then back to Fairfax, juggling it and then evading one, beating another. Fairfax down towards the halfway before Graham Quinn makes the tackle on the elusive Russell Fairfax. Taking it up is Royce Aylett now. Play it back to Mount here, right on the halfway mark. Bob O'Reilly. O'Reilly to play it. No gain in ground made by the Eastern Suburbs side. It's Fulton getting it across the ground for Hastings, and now on the left of the field again Royce Aylett. Fulton. Stevens. And on the burst, Alan Power. About 8 metres inside St George's territory. Fulton. End on end, but Butler's there. He has it covered. 10 metres out from his line, coming out to the 22. And Butler tackled by Hastings and O'Reilly. Playing it back to Soladimi. Dummy half is Jeffries. Now with Craig Young. Grant switching the play across to Stone and then to Reddy, and coming in from the wing is Mullins. All the publicity leading up to this game is how Eastern Suburbs are going to contain Reddy. And 10 metres outside the 22 on the last tackle to Carney. Torpedo punt going down over the head of Schubert. This could find touch. No, it's actually stood on its end. And Schubert to play at about 10 metres from the halfway.
Yes, this looks as if it's going to be particularly rugged. It looks as if both teams, though, have settled down after that initial minute or so when we saw a few handling errors. We haven't had a real scrum. Well, we haven't had a scrum as yet, Frank.
No, but the Eastern Suburbs forwards are taking it right up to them and also looking for support, but St George are not doing that. They were hemmed in on their own quarter line there, and they were playing one out, you notice. The forward just taking up and taking the tackle in addition.
Eastern Suburbs, and again it's Alan Power making a good run, and Hastings dropping it. That could have been a chance for Eastern Suburbs.
It was certainly a chance on that occasion.
Another handling error, and it's St George in possession. Midway between the 22 and the halfway, it's out to Trudgett. Butler is the dummy half. Harris one tackler with Mossman. Jeffries. Young, Finch, O'Reilly over the top. Rodredy, Jansen coming on the inside. It goes on the outside though to Graham Quinn and back to Jeffries. Last tackle coming up for the Saints now. No score, and we're at the 4th minute of the first quarter. Ready. Stabbing for the line, but it's inside that particular point, and it's Fairfax now. Taken by Mitch Brennan. Hubert.
Both teams fully utilising the 6 tackles at the moment.
Yeah.
Through Fulton, it's gone back to Michael Mossman. Hastings. Aleph. Left knee heavily bandaged. Member of the 74 schoolboys side that toured England with such great success. Mossman. Taken by Brennan. Electrifying player is Mitch Brennan. And he scored that memorable try down the right flank that puts him well in reckoning for the golden try. Trudgett. Another handling lapse there, and it's Eastern Suburbs ball. Fulton to play it. Mountier running to the left. Turning it back on the right to Hastings. Royce Aleph. Fulton. O'Reilly. The big bear to the halfway. O'Reilly looking for Fairfax, but driven onto that left shoulder by Graham Quinn. Fairfax. Hastings. Fulton. Mackay on the inside. Number 9 for Eastern Suburbs. Last one coming up for the Tricolours. Fulton. Stabbing for the touchline. Sorodimi's got it. Outside the 22. And possession continues to fluctuate at a very rapid rate at the moment. It's with Young. Out to Reddy, and now to Trudgett. On his knees, back to Reddy. Looks for Brennan, finds him. Schubert's coming across and bundles him into touch.
That's one thing about Eastern Suburbs defence, Frank. They're very quick to reformulate, aren't they? They get back into position very quickly, and they just keep plugging those gaps.
If they can only do this for the full 4 quarters, they're going to be hard to beat.
Well, they've shown in matches so far that they are capable of doing it, and I think St George are going to have to go up the middle of the rucks, because you notice the flatness with the Eastern Suburbs defence. They keep moving up and driving them back into the middle.
But you notice that St George have weathered that early onslaught, Keith, and they're settling down and starting to play a bit better football now.
Co-commentators tonight, Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes on the 78 Cup final. Carney feeding. St George ball. Ready. Trudgett. Butler coming up. Ready to ruck half. Carney's calling for it. That's him. Finch throws the dummy. Spirals away from Harris, but gives it back to Jeffries, and he's tackled immediately by Fulton. No big pardons in that one. Young, ready, dribbling back and getting it to Stone. The big man up the centre. To the halfway goes Stone. Tackled by Harris and by Fulton. Now Young. Craig Young looking to unload. He does that to Grant, and it's been overrun. Well done by the St George number 9 there. And it's still Mitch Brennan. Back to Quinn. And down to about 30 metres out from the Eastern Suburbs line. Young again, the man that started it. Ready. On the inside, it's Robert Stone. Young, a quick pass to Jeffries. Ball to the ground. Grant dives for it. And it's loose, and I think it's an East ball it is. The Roosters in possession. Mossman.
Both teams quick to capitalise on any handling errors, aren't they?
That's right, yes, but Eastern Suburbs are quick to that loose ball, aren't they?
John Mackay. Trudgett and Fairfax in a bit of a scuffle up. Danzy quickly tells Fairfax to get away out of it. It's Fulton. Fulton! Fulton! 35 metres out. Draws Butler for Hastings. Look at Brennan. But Hastings scores the first Cup try. Magnificent break by Fulton. And there's Hastings, the try scorer, as we pick it up on the Cup final Amco replay. Fulton split the red and whites over halfway. Then deep inside the territory, he draws Butler. Hastings now sees the goal mouth 10 metres upfield, and Brennan flew from nowhere about 1 second too late.
And he wouldn't have wanted to have been much further either, because Brennan was really flying. But Fulton certainly hoodwinked the defence then. I think St George was certainly anticipating that he was going to move the ball back out across the eastern suburbs flanks, and he saw the gap there, moved away from dummy half, and showed acceleration too to get through the gap, didn't he? And great anticipation by Hastings to follow him through.
And what beautiful experience shone out there, with Fulton taking Butler away and then looking inside and beautifully timed the pass to Hastings.
So Stevens from right in front, looking to make it 5-0, and he does that. The crowd roars as Eastern Suburbs draw first blood. 5-0 the scoreline, 10 minutes gone, first quarter.
Very important break too, isn't it? 5-0 in 10 minutes of this. It's going to be a real thriller.
That's right. Keith, the way the tackling has been in these first few minutes, you wouldn't believe that a try could be scored from halfway like that.
No.
Kick-off time again. Reddy takes it. Down to the try scorer, Hastings. And here's Mullins now. 10 metres out from the 22. Stevens. Hastings, Fulton, Aliff, now to Harris. Taken by Grant. Mackay. Now to Yerk, calling them to the blind side. That's probably the foil. He runs himself to the right, and then it's Riley going back on the scoreboard side. Aliff, Fulton, now to Harris.
Good tackle by Grant there. He had a big game last week, of course, particularly with his goal kicking, and that could play an important part in tonight's game.
Yeah, and this reversing of play, it's all plain scuff, you notice. Taking it out with Aliff wide and sending it back into Fulton again and then to Harris.
St George's scrum, going to the right of the field is Trudgett. Looking in vain for support. Jansen. Craig Young calling for it. Mistake by Jeffries. Out to Grant. Unexpected touch of the ball. Young now. Ready.
I was just going to say he hasn't been brought into the game very much so far already. He's biding his time. He had a real blinder last week.
Craig Young. Ready. Finch. Lost to Stevens.
That's how St George could lose this game, by losing the ball as much as they have.
Rally. Hastings again. Aliff. Hastings and Fulton. Now Fairfax. Picked up by Sorodini, and that could have been a chance for St George. There was no one at home.
It certainly wasn't on in that particular position. It was a planned move, of course, but the ball came a little bit slowly to Fulton there when he switched to the Fairfax, and the St George defence was aware of it.
Jansen. Eastern Suburbs standing right up on St George and putting them to ground. It's with Young. A real danger man for Eastern Suburbs. It's Craig Young.
To let the ball go quickly. They had the overlap out the way there on the right flank.
Now Reddy's looking for it on the right of the field. Here's Reddy. Trudgett out of the tackle. He's got Graham Quinn with him, but Fulton's across in cover with Hastings. Now for the last tackle for St George, we might see the bomb. It's with on the blind side, Jansen, then to Brennan. Back in field, it's Boston in position.
They're attacking that blind side a lot, and I think they feel that East are a little bit vulnerable over there. They certainly haven't covered it as well as I'm sure their coach Arthur Beetson would want them to.
But of course, St George can't capitalise because they're losing possession, Keith. About 5 times now since the game started. And I think Reddy will need to run wider of the rucks too.
Fulton. Alan Power. Trudgett made that tackle. Now here's Fulton. He'll look for the touchline. It's rolling end on end, and it's going to beat Butler, is it? Yes, it beats Butler. Great kick by Bobby Fulton. Scrum to go down 15 metres into St George territory.
He's a masterful thinker, isn't he, Fulton? His tactical kicking has gained many, many yards for Eastern Suburbs and got them out of a lot of ticklish situations throughout the year, and he's going to be controlling and directing operations around the rucks more than ever now, of course, with Beatson off the field.
Fulton cuts out Mullins to Harris. There's an overlap being created by Fulton's pass. Harris.
Too late. He should have given it straight away.
Bad blunder by the big centre. Fulton.
He revels in this sort of football, doesn't he, Fulton?
Hastings. Mountier. Eastern Suburbs 5. St George yet to score. 5 minutes out from quarter time. O'Reilly. Good tackle by Trudgett. Haliff. Now to Fulton. There goes the bomb. Pressure now to Butler. Fulton's been felled. Butler blocked the fullback to score. Magnificent Eastern Suburbs try. Well, have a look at this, would you? The Bobby Fulton bomb. And you'd swear blind that Butler had this. Up he goes with Carney and Fairfax right over the top.
I think Carney got in Butler's way there.
Yes, but gee, they score a lot of tries like that, don't they? That Fairfax-Fulton combination, and I haven't seen anyone get up as high as Fulton does. It looks as if he's got a pole vaulter there. He gets right up in the air, Fairfax.
Yeah.
It was in a wonderful position there for Kevin Stevens now, and 10 points in, 16 minutes.
That's right.
It's a wonderful start, and they've certainly set St George right back on their heels. They've had 2 opportunities, and they've come up with 2 tries.
The kick by Stevens successful, and Eastern Suburbs bowled away. They lead by 10 points to 0 now. 2 cup finals and 2 sensational tries by Russell Fairfax. There he is, the man who last year had such a forgettable night. Even though he played super football, tonight, surely it can't happen again. It's Fairfax now, inside the 22. Mullins. Mountier. Haliff. That's Mackay. Hastings. O'Reilly. The big man taking some pulling down. Fulton. Variation in tactics. It was Trudgett, though.
Yes, he wasn't too happy with that one, I don't think.
Played back to Grant. Knocked on a dummy half, and another very costly error for St George.
Important scrum, this one, though, isn't it? Because if they're able to win, if Jeffries does win this one, it'll allow them to mount a little bit of pressure, because they haven't really pressured Eastern Suburbs defences in a situation like this.
No.
Penalty to St George. It's against the half, Hastings. And Grant, with the breeze behind him, should have little trouble in bringing up St George's first points.
Yes, and that's the first penalty of the game, Frank.
That's right, yes. Well, the pace has been tremendous, you know, and just bad handling from St George has featured this first 17 minutes, but penalties are very few and far between.
Important kick for Green too. It's certainly in a very kickable position, and one that you wouldn't expect a kicker of Green's ability to miss. Very important to get points on the board now for St George, trailing 10 points to 0. They've got to pick themselves up off the floor, and Harry Barth is going to have to do a lot of talking at quarter time.
That's right, and having the advantage of this breeze too in this first half, St George.
St George Grant mopping a bit of perspiration from the brow as he moves in, strikes it, and it's successful. The Dragons are on the way, down 10-2, and quarter time just over 60 seconds away. George Grant. This telecast tonight being beamed practically throughout Australia and into New Zealand. And a very special thank you to the people at Telecom for their assistance in beaming this Cup final to Brisbane. A few problems associated with that link-up, but that's been corrected, and here's Bobby Fulton. About to restart. We'll have about 45 seconds of action before quarter time. Butler. And he's lost it. Scrum will barely have time to form.
You can't make mistakes in situations like that and expect to get away with the game. It's putting a lot of pressure on your teammates when you make mistakes like that.
Harry Bath. Study of concentration. Eastern Suburbs have won it. Fulton's won that race for the ball. Seconds remain before the quarter-time siren. Fairfax, he realises there's no time left. It's in the air. He's putting Butler back under pressure. Up they go, the Tricolours and the Dragons, and it stacks on the mill. As the siren sounds, it goes dead in goal. Referee Danzy acknowledging now that the siren has gone. And at quarter time in this cup final, Eastern Suburbs 10, St George 2. Quarter-final scoreline in the Amco Cup 1978 final, Eastern Suburbs 10, St George 2. On the presentation dais tonight, we'll be announcing the player who will have scored sufficient points in tonight's match to take out the Singapore Airlines Superstar Award, and he'll receive an envelope containing details for a 3-week holiday for two to the continent, England and Singapore, with Singapore Airlines and Air Tours Australia. A great prize for the Superstar of 1978. I just stated, of course, that tonight's man of the match points will determine the superstar for the year, and that's how open the race is at this very moment. Any one of 12 players could be a superstar after tonight. Now, here are the progress points on your screen, just pointing out that very same thing. St George, Carney, Reddy on 3, Quinn, Brennan, Jeffries on 2, Jansen, Stone and Grant on 1, and for Eastern Suburbs, Hastings, the leader, on 4 points, Harrison Beatson on 3, Fairfax 2, and O'Reilly 1. In the event of a tie, the player who scores the most points tonight will automatically become the winner on a countback. Okay, let's go to Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes now with their quarter-time review. And my first question of you, Frank Hyde, is 2 tries, 2 brilliant tries by Eastern Suburbs. Can St George get their act together? It's a pretty clumsy one after 20 minutes. Yes,
they've made too many mistakes, handling mistakes, and not moving up on the Eastern Suburbs players in possession. I feel that Eastern Suburbs have that advantage of experience, because this is really cup tie football, and there could be a change in the next 3 quarters. I realise that, but so far Eastern Suburbs has shown just what experience they have. Now, O'Reilly is taking the ball up, firstly. That's his role, evidently. They're reversing play back in field with Harris coming in. They're using all the experienced players, with Fulton the hub of everything. And unless they run out of steam, well, I must concede that Keith has picked a winner in this one with his winning it.
Keith, Stephen Butler earlier in the year was a very safe fullback under pressure from bombs, but later in the year we've noticed him often come off on the wrong side of them.
Yes, and he's a little bit shaky out there this evening too, and full marks to Russell Fairfax, because he's picked that. He's noticed that he went up to take the ball out of Butler's arms to score that second try, and then shortly afterwards, when Grant kicked the goal and Fulton kicked off, again it was Butler that made an elementary mistake. And you notice that as soon as Eastern Suburbs had possession, Fairfax put the ball high up in the air again, straight at Butler, and didn't give him any chance to settle down. That's good tactics. But the dominant figure out there at the moment, of course, is Fulton. He's calling the tune and pulling the strings and playing particularly well, and Eastern Suburbs appreciating possession, and that's the difference between the two teams at the moment.
That quarter-time wrap-up from Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes. In just a few moments, back to all the action of the 1978 Amco Cup final, with Eastern Suburbs 10, St George 2. So we're back now for the second quarter of the Amco Cup, and Mitch Brennan is off the field at the moment. And if that is a permanent situation, then St George have really suffered a body blow. They're in possession and down 10-2.
I'd say he's got a shoulder injury or an arm injury. It looks as if he's got a needle from the St George Club doctor there, but he's coming back onto the field.
Yes, well, I didn't hasten into the comment on Mitch Brennan, because I couldn't see a replacement, and it did appear that Brennan was about to go back on, and then he went back and was wrapped up in a blanket while they did some further treatment on him. So it's St George now with their backs to the wall again, a very familiar sight after 21 minutes of football, and that kick was by Craig Young. It's with Schubert. Fairfax will go with him. Schubert. A dummy and then a change of pace, taking him about 3 metres into St George's territory. Fairfax, Hastings, Mackay. Mackay again. Hastings. Fulton, the run round with Hastings, and now Mark Harris. Tackled by Trudgett.
Only just though, he was nearly on his way, wasn't he?
Out to O'Reilly, Mackay, front rower to second rower, and the outside of that pair was Mossman, would you believe? So, a very unlikely sight standing out in the actual 5-8 inside and outside centre position. Fulton giving it to O'Reilly, and back to Schubert. That's the end of the tackle count, and the scrum is to go down just outside the 22 on St George's end of the field, in front of the scoreboard. Put in by Carney. Battle for possession. Referee Danzy wants it again. And it's an Eastern Suburbs ball. Fulton and Hastings working. Hastings lofting one over the top to Fairfax.
Oh, lovely.
That is
Fairfax
on the outside power. Now Mullins back towards the 22, and Grust about 22 metres out. Out to Ailiff. Ailiff looking for O'Reilly coming on the burst, but O'Reilly is going into dummy half now. Fulton calling for it on the right. There he is with the ball. Now to Mark Harris. Onto the 22. Wrestled to the ground by Reddy. Power, number 4 for Eastern Suburbs. Stevens opting to go himself. Here's O'Reilly. And this big man has created problems for St George, and here is Michael Mossman now. One-handed pass to Hastings. Turning it around to Mackay. Mackay over the 22. Mountier goes ahead a further couple of metres. Last tackle coming up for the Roosters. Leading by 10-2. Fulton. There it goes again. Another test for Butler. Butler's above them, and I think he's lost it again. He has. Yes, he has. George Grant with it. It's a penalty. It's offside.
I noticed Fairfax flattened his back too as he followed the kick through. But of course you can't entirely blame the fullback in a situation like that, Butler. He's a sitting duck, isn't he? Everyone's charging through and he hasn't got much opportunity.
Not only the opposition coming down on him, Keith, but his own players in front of him are in his road going up for the ball, and he must keep his eye on the ball so he can't see where they all are.
And in a situation like that, of course, a lot of the Eastern Suburbs players are going up there just with
to harass him.
That's right. Yeah. Of course, they're making the pretext of going for the ball, but in effect, they're making sure that Butler doesn't get to it and the ball goes loose, and then, of course, it's 50-50 who gets it.
But they're beautifully placed kicks. The 3 that they've had so far are beautifully placed.
Stevens now with a very simple penalty shot. Very versatile player is Kevin Stevens. Moving up. Strikes it. No troubles. And Eastern Suburbs lead 12 points to 2 through the courtesy of the boot of Kevin Stevens, who created such problems for Balmain at the weekend. And ironically, Kevin Stevens is the man that the reports have it Balmain have been trying to purchase for next year.
Well, that's 3 out of 3 for Kevin Stevens. He doesn't have the goal-kicking range of George Green, but from 35 yards out, he's tremendously accurate and piles up a lot of points.
Reddy taking the kick off. Hubert sending a divot of turf skyward as he went for traction inside the 22. Harris. Ooh, Jeffries coming down hard over the top of Harris. Brought a sigh from the crowd. Hastings. And he was thumped to the ground by Jansen.
He was left on his own then. He was looking for a forward, and there was no one to be found. One of the few occasions, of course.
O'Reilly. Hastings. Getting that left boot to it. Brennan going back for it. Now, let's see if Brennan's still got his speed after that injury he suffered. Yes, there's plenty of speed there. He's through Schubert. And that brought back memories of that try as he lost his footing On to Young. Out to Trudgett, and there's another St George error. Eastern Suburbs go back onto the attack through Fulton. Now Mark Harris looking to unload, but to my way of thinking, a couple of seconds too late. Onto O'Reilly. Cuts out Mountier. Schubert couldn't see it because of players between him and the ball carrier.
See, East can make mistakes like that and recover. Same thing with St George. They're not there to take advantage of it.
No, but the big point about Eastern Suburbs is that their defence are moving up quickly and they're pressuring St George all the time, and they're forcing them into those areas.
So that's against the ball player, in fact, interfering with the marker. And it's a very interesting one, especially for the youngsters watching this telecast tonight, and I'm sure a lot of them have received dispensations from their parents to sit up and watch the Amco telecast. But it's a rule that is not applied as much as I think it should be. And watching a lot of junior football these days, it's something that's creeping into their game, and it certainly is refreshing to see Jack Danzy clamping down on us and giving such a clear indication of what the penalty is over. So George Grant now to take a penalty kick for goal. At half-time tonight, we'll be screening the 5 runners-up in the Golden Try competition, and those tries will include the players nominated as the maker of that try, and each of them will win a holiday with Clippers Anchorage from Cole and Candle Creek. We'll then announce the actual Golden Try and nominee for the 1978 Golden Try Award, together with the name of the viewer, who has also won the Clippers holiday in the viewers competition. George Grant moving up, looking for 12-4. It's got the length, it's got the height, but it's wide.
There's a little bit of a drift of that bottom right-hand corner, and Grant hit the ball okay, and there was a little bit of a drift there, and it took it just outside that right-hand upright. Plenty of distance, though. But a let-off as far as East are concerned, and points that St George desperately need.
Carries a very famous rugby league name, but no relation. Trudgett. From Oberon in New South Wales. Now to Young. Ready. He's lost it. Hastings with the ball, but referee Damsey has called a halt. And he's going to put down a scrum for the double knock-on.
7 times so far, St George have forfeited possession by losing it.
Yes, I think St George probably making a mistake. They're attempting to play the game across the field rather than go straight up the middle, and I think they're playing into Eastern Suburbs' hands at the moment, because Fulton and Harris are masters at that moving up.
Trudgett has split them wide open.
But notice how quickly they recover.
That's right.
They're back into position and the lane is there.
Graham Quinn from dummy half, gaining a further 10 metres, and Reddy is very anxious for the ball. That's him with it now. Young's on his outside. Aylett across the top with a dubious one. Young calling for it on the right. That's him.
The try by St George at this stage are really bringing the light on.
Oh, yes.
11 minutes out from half-time. Trudgett. Last tackle coming up now. Young turns it back to Robert Finch, back to Grant, and away the pass, too hard to Trudgett.
I still think that's the area that they should be attacking.
That's right. That's right, because East have got that straight line of defence right across the field, and once it's broken, if there's support for the ball carrier, there's a try on.
Fed by Hastings, won by Eastern Suburbs. Hastings away very, very quickly. It must have been a very clean ball, won by Arthur Mountier. Fulton, Stevens, Harris, back to Stevens. Put the ground by Finch. Mossman. Taken by Finch.
It's one of the few occasions that they capitalise on it, isn't it?
Yes.
Ready. Young. Trudgett. Jeffries. John Jansen. Trudgett again. Trudgett getting it back. It's with Jansen again. Jansen, neat little swerve around. 8 metres from the 22. Craig Young. Now ready. Brennan has come from the right wing. It's gone to Carney. Carney to the 22. Mitch Brennan is there, as you can see, a dummy half on the left of the field. He's come from the right, and the penalty goes to St George against Fulton.
I don't know what Bobby Fulton was really complaining about. He's a past master of laying all over the person that he tackles and keeps them down as long as possible. And of course, this is very good tactics. It allows the defence to get back into position as well. That was probably the first occasion, though, that St George had really put their game together, and they did look dangerous.
They certainly did. And probably, I have a suspicion that Fulton may have engineered this just to make sure that attacking rhythm was broken down temporarily.
Fulton, of course, you mightn't read about that part of his play in his Rugby League book, but you'll certainly read a lot more about Rugby League in a magnificent publication by Bobby Fulton. On sale now. George Grant taking a penalty kick for St George. Strikes it. It's high enough. But it's just wide, Frank Hyde.
I thought it had to go in, didn't you? Like, it was just outside there all the time and looking for the little drift.
And the wind was on this side of him, too.
It didn't come from him. It was a very well-placed kick, and I'd say he would have been very happy with it when it left his boot.
Arthur Mounty are playing it. Hastings giving it to Fulton. Now to O'Reilly. Taken to ground by Grant. Fulton looking to get the kick in, I feel sure, but he was blotted out of the game very quickly, and now St George swarm over Fulton.
You don't see them play their game in this area very often, Eastern Suburbs. Fairfax,
he's another one of the players that might get the kick in, and I doubt that he should have kicked it after all that. He's given the penalty away for shepherding. So Grant will be called on maybe to take another kick for goal, but Reddy seems like he might be just as keen to take the tap. That's what he's about.
Well, where are the rest of these forward to be going?
He's going to put it over the line.
Oh.
Well, he's looking to come back to give himself that extra couple of yards.
So he also gives it to Eastern Suburbs too.
Yes, of course.
Well, Eastern Suburbs might have been sent a telegram, but Grant now is accepted by East and put to ground.
That was bad captaincy by Reddy in my book.
Let's see what happens this time. Looking to break that Eastern Suburbs defence.
So he was over the line at one stage then.
Robert Stone it was. St George now. They go to the right, and here's Reddy. Reddy trying to get the pass away. In the far corner, ready to play it. Playing it back to John Jansen. Towed through by Eastern Suburbs. Scooped back into the field of play by Jansen. Good play by him. Grant has it though. Grant to play it. Tackle count. Yes, it started again, Frank, as they go on to the attack against St George. Young out to Trudgett. Dummies once, then back to Butler.
That's good Eastern Suburbs defence, Keith.
Jeffries to Young. And the big man looking to unload. And too hard to Jansen.
Well, they don't get too many opportunities better than that one, and Craig Young certainly pierced the Eastern Suburbs defence, which is no mean feat, and he had plenty of time to hold up his pass, didn't he? Looked for Jansen and threw it just a fraction high with Jansen steaming onto it.
Mountier is down injured for Eastern Suburbs as Mullins comes crashing away with the ball.
I don't think East will play it down here for too long.
Stevens. O'Reilly. Mossman. Fast tackle coming up for Eastern Suburbs. They're looking for Bobby Fulton. That's him. Swings around Finch and gets the kick in down into centre field, and Butler, of course, is over on the touchline. He's got to make his long run across field, and he's got Michael Sorodimi with him, and you wouldn't believe it.
They got up quick there, Eastern Suburbs, didn't they? Well placed kick by Fulton too. He picked Butler out of position, or picked where he was, and kicked to the open space.
Butler was looking for the grubber kick that he's used several times.
Is that breeze drifting around a little bit?
Yes, it seems to be coming straight from the west now.
Craig Young to the halfway. 5 minutes out from half-time. Jeffries, ready. Looks on the inside, but nobody wants it. And it's gone forward, so the scrum to go down just on St George's side of halfway.
Well, as last week, Reddy was picking up the runners with those passes. He's not finding them this evening, and Eastern Suburbs, of course, paying him plenty of attention and not giving him any latitude whatsoever.
Carney to feed.
There's not much in the game, though, even though Eastern Suburbs 12 points to 2, you'd say they'd have a handy lead, but
Finch. Robert Finch around one, taken though by Stevens and driven into the ground. Ready to Stone, then to Saradini. Graham Quinn. Stevens again, a good tackle. Craig Young, back to Trudgett. Trudgett playing it back to Jansen. Second row for St George makes about 8 metres before going to ground, midway between the 22 and the halfway. Last tackle coming up for the Saints to Craig Young. Back it goes to Graham Quinn. On it goes to Jansen. He can't handle it. It's been picked up by a player in offside position.
You notice, Keith, when the St George forwards make a run, they have to pass the ball at least 5 metres back. There is nobody running on with them. Not like with Eastern Suburbs.
No, East are picking each other up a lot closer.
Each other up.
Banked away on the far side of the field, making a colourful sight as they swell right back to the top of the embankments at Leichhardt, adjacent to the scoreboard, and sitting on top of every vantage point they can find. So Stevens to take the tap. Ailiff, and then the reverse move by Eastern Suburbs.
Came unstuck, didn't it?
It certainly did.
I'd say Bobby Fulton laying down the law, then he wouldn't be too happy about that one. And notice how fat they're standing, Eastern Suburbs, with Fulton and Harris.
Yes, well, they're winning an equal share of the scrum.
But they're being pressured into that particular situation,
right,
I think, with the tactics that Eastern Suburbs are applying. And it's surprising that Reddy hasn't worked up to that particular fact.
But look at the ease with which Eastern Suburbs can pass it. Even though they don't gain any ground, they're passing it from one to the other, and there's nobody knocking them down.
This is John McConnell. Just on the St George side of halfway. Out to Fulton. Hastings electing to go himself for Stevens. It was virtually too close for him. Mountier. From dummy half goes Mountier. Now the Eastern Suburbs back line is fanned out wide and deep. Stevens, O'Reilly. Back to Fulton. There goes the kick. Down to Stephen Butler. Bouncing almost at the base of the uprights. It's gone into the in-goal area, and Butler gets his pass away to Mitch Brennan. 7 metres out is Brennan. Saradini right across the field. Mullins and Fulton making the tackle.
And I thought there was danger there for a minute. It looked as if there was a bit of a gap, but basically it closed quickly, didn't it?
Jansen playing it just inside the 22. Craig Young. Back to Trudgett. Out to Robert Finch. Now the last tackle for St George. Back to Grant. Gets the kick in. Down to Fairfax. And he's taking Schubert with him. Brennan makes the tackle. Schubert. Mountier. There's the halftime siren sounding, and referee Danzy has called a halt. And so in the 1978 Amco Cup final at half-time, Eastern Suburbs 12, St George 2. Who do you now see as the winner of the Cup final?
It's going to be hard to take it away from Eastern Suburbs at this stage, holding a very handy 10 points advantage, and particularly the way they're playing. They value possession, I think, much more than St George for the first 40 minutes of the half, and they played good percentage football, good cup-take football, based on defence, and this is the game that they've been playing all through the season, of course. Their tactical kicking is particularly good with Fulton, the ringmaster, and a lot of pressure on St George now. They have to score, and they have to score early in this second half if they're going to get back into the game, and of course they're being forced into errors.
Frank, if you had a chance to change your tip, would you?
Well, yes, I would at this stage, because I didn't think that Eastern Suburbs could sustain the effort that they put in these two quarters. They pressured, as Keith has said, they've pressured St George to such an extent that they're forcing them into errors. Now, I think on about 7 occasions in those first 2 quarters, St George lost the ball to Eastern Suburbs. You can't do that sort of thing, because the scrums are 5-4 in favour of St George at this stage. But when you consider the possession that Eastern Suburbs have had, and they've been able to use it and do something with it too, incidentally, St George appear to be frustrated now, and you can see the sort of things that Reddy is doing it's not the Reddy of last week, because he's being pressured. A couple of balls he threw on the ground there, which is not the sort of football you expect from him. And he's had to come in close. He's been getting rid of the ball earlier than I would like him to. I'd like him to stand back and move away from the ruck, because the more he makes these Eastern Suburbs forwards run, the easier it's going to be for them. But of course, he's got to stop them from coming up quickly.
Well, one of the big problems, of course, and it's making it difficult for Reddy, is the fact that the likes of Fulton and Harris are moving up very quickly and driving them back into the Eastern Suburbs defence. That's right. Moving up quick on the inside, isn't it?
Interesting placard in the Eastern Suburbs dressing room, which I didn't have a chance to remark on earlier. Huge placard. Let the Roosters put the rocket into orbit. They haven't really put him into orbit, but I think they're trying to put him underneath the ground.
Yeah. Well, he hasn't blasted off yet, has he?
It's been legitimate tackling, don't take me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Okay, fellows, thanks very much. Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes with the commentary tonight on the Amco Cup final. And so we come back to Leichhardt for the second half of the Amco Cup final, and there's the helicopter view on the O10 coverage of the Amco Cup, giving you at home some idea of Amco Cup final atmosphere. 12-2 the score in favour of Eastern Suburbs as we cut back to the ground cameras. And St George from left to right. No changes.
Keep an eye on Red Reddy in these opening minutes, Frank. I just had an idea that he was limping when he was trotting back onto the field.
Oh.
Reddy kicks it down to Schubert. Breeze with Eastern Suburbs in the second half, although as Keith Barnes remarked, it does appear as though it might have swung around a fraction and could even be blowing straight across the field. O'Reilly. Frank Hyde made the comment earlier on that 4-quarter football certainly should suit players like O'Reilly, and if he keeps going like he did in the first half, he's going to be right up there in the man of the match voting. Mossman. Last tackle coming up for Eastern Suburbs. Back to Hastings. Gets the kick onto the left boot and down to Stephen Butler. Coming outside the 22 and taken by Hastings and Mountier. Carney. As Keith Barnes said, St George have got to make the bust and make it very, very early on in the second half. Ready. Eastern Suburbs have a player down injured at the moment. It's Kevin Hastings. Craig Young. Back to Jansen. Young again. Trudgett. Chipping over the top. Trudgett's coming between the Eastern Suburbs players. Stevens dives on it.
A little bit unfortunate. He could have got the penalty there, St George.
Power to play it. Aylett.
Keith, St George is still waiting for Eastern Suburbs to come to them instead of moving up and knocking them down as East are doing to them.
That's the big difference in the two sides as far as the defensive pattern is concerned.
Stevens. Hastings. Fulton. O'Reilly. Getting it back to Mountier. Hastings, and Hastings is into the gap with Aylett. Power now. Schubert. Fulton. Testing Butler again. Crowd loving every moment of this. Seeing A superb performance by Bobby Poulton as the penalty goes to St. George. Absolutely superb effort by this man.
Now, I have a suspicion, Ray, that the fact that him playing 5'8" was something known to Eastern Suburbs all the week.
Yes, well, he played against Palomino here on Sunday, and his name appeared in the program as a centre, but I can assure you that he played in any other position but that. He was directing operations exactly the same way as he is out there this evening.
The point I make is that Harry Bath has probably devised his tactics, thinking Fulton was at 7.
Mark Harris playing it on the 22. Fulton switching it to O'Reilly. Mackay. No change in score. 4 minutes of the third quarter gone. 12-2. O'Reilly.
Bad pass by O'Reilly there. He was lucky to get away with it, I think. Perhaps the St. George player knocked it back to him. No, St. George in possession.
Soraldini plays it. And Graham Quinn goes away with it to the touchline on the far side and then driven back in the tackle over the top by Bill Mullins. Young, back to Jansen. Craig Young picking it up nicely. It was a bad pass. Carney. Stone. Saladini almost away. Ready. Eastern Suburbs really sweating on Ready. Carney. Badly placed it. Schubert's had a pretty long run for it. Brennan chasing Schubert, but now Fairfax coming back at the different angle. And the ball kicker, Carney, makes the tackle. Hastings, Ailiff, out to Power, taken by Robert Finch. Royce Ailiff. Graham Quinn going in for swinging arm, and the referee Dancy hasn't missed him either.
Couldn't really miss him in a situation like that. Probably pretty pointless, wasn't it, as far as Quinn was concerned?
Well, it was a real attention getter. Attracting mainly the attention of referee Jack Dancy and giving the penalty to Eastern Suburbs. And it certainly, I feel, indicates some of the frustration in this St. George side. Brought upon by the excellent defence of Eastern Suburbs. I think it's the main reason for the frustration we're seeing through this St. George effort tonight. Schubert. Arthur Maltier, one of the unsung heroes of the Eastern Suburbs victories in the Cup through 78. Hastings. Kevin Hastings is not too well. Well, now, that could have easily been a penalty to St. George. It's with Ailiff. Fairfax. Maltier. Hastings. Mackay. Put down by Trudgett. O'Reilly. Hastings has it. Referee Dancy ruling a knock on, and it's going to be a scrum on the 22.
Yes, O'Reilly looking to get his pass away there. Hastings lurking in the background all the time, isn't he? Looking for that pass.
Had he been able to flick it, it would have been a good pass too, but he just dropped it down in front of him. He's looking to get rid of it all the time, O'Reilly, isn't he?
Scrum on by the Eastern Suburbs side, but
yes,
referee Dancy
went there too.
has pulled out Grant and Ready.
He's certainly in the wars tonight, Hastings, isn't he? He's caught the shoulder a couple of minutes ago, and now then a head. And now, of course, he's caught this one in the ankle, but he's given Eastern Suburbs tremendous service. He's had some wonderful games in the lead up to this Amco Cup final.
All the players, administrators and commentators of Rugby League are getting ready for the great Rugby League Golf Day for charity. That's the 78 Henry Winterman's Rugby League Pro-Am. Proceeds to Legacy. If you're not playing in the event, we do hope that you'll be able to come out and see all the Rugby League superstars at golf at the New South Wales Golf Course on Monday the 28th of July. That's Monday, August I should say. That's Monday week, and we can assure you of a real fun day seeing the stars in action in another sport. So the penalty going to Eastern Suburbs, and Stevens should have little trouble with this one. He's very, very accurate from around the this kicking area. 12-2 and 14-2 is going to take them outside the range of 2 converted tries.
They're not giving any real indication at the moment, St George, that they can get back into the game, are they?
I can't see it, Keith.
They're persisting in their tactics that they employed in that first half.
Stevens strikes it. It's there. 14 points to 2 is the score.
And that's 4 goals from 4 attempts from Stevens.
Of course, they've all been in very kickable positions, haven't they, as far as Kevin Stevens is concerned, and we know what an accurate kicker he is. But he's been responsible for 8 very important points, hasn't he?
Ready. Starting play again. Sending it down between Stevens, Fairfax and Schubert. And the latter comes away with it. Now here. Fulton. Mullins. O'Reilly. Back to Stevens. With Mackay. Hastings. Saradimi was looking for that one to bounce up and hit him in the chest, and he would have been well and truly in to score.
Referee Nancy not too popular with that one, but he was right on the spot, and Saradimi came in on the fly for that goal. If he'd been lucky enough to be favoured by a good bounce, it would have been 5 points.
Stephen Edge is on in place of Jeffries too at this stage.
Hastings officiating a scrum base for Eastern Suburbs. St George's ball. Budget. Finch. County.
See, that's that Eastern Suburbs defence, Keith. They won the ball, St George, and lost 10 metres.
That's right.
Stephen Edge, the 77 skipper. Graham Quinn. Ready. Young. Trudgett. Strong little fellow. It's a lot of work for St George. That's Stephen Edge in 16. And this is their last tackle. They're back to where the previous scrum formed. Quinn. Now they're going to pressure Fairfax. Saradimi's coming very quickly. Oh, Grant almost had that ball. Referee Danzy's going to put a scrum down for the dual knock-on.
Well, Fairfax was in a similar situation to what Butler found himself, and of course he had no opportunity of getting to the ball then.
Very important scrum, this one. Penalty to the Saints. Incorrect feed, is it? Against Hastings, yes. Indicating that he wants the ball fed in a downward motion. And it's a presentation for St George, but they've decided that it's too late for the 2 points.
Yes, I was wondering what Reddy would do. I think I'd be inclined to take the 2 points all the same, but it's good tactics as far as Eastern Suburbs concerned, because there's not much chance of Grant kicking 7 goals to kick them to the lead.
Right.
And admittedly they get him. That's right. Admittedly he's picking up an easy 2 points, but 2's better than 5, and they've got a big leeway to make up. And I don't think Bobby Fulton would be too concerned about giving away that 2 points in a situation like that.
Much more, the time wasted in the kicking of the goal is valuable time, particularly for Eastern Suburbs.
As the most famous rugby league commentator of all time, what about calling this goal for me?
Well, he has it placed right in front. And he should be able to throw it over from there. There it is. Well, it's long, it's high, and it's a beauty straight between the face.
14 points to 4, the scoreline. Eastern Suburbs with 8 minutes of the third quarter remaining. I doubt that there would be any more, what will I say, well-known phrasing in rugby league than what we just heard on the Amco Cup for the first time.
Sometimes it's introduced with a little more culture than that, though. So
Bozo Fulton has it placed for another restart. And it's going down to Carney. Got his pass away delicately, but very, very professionally there to Finch, who turned it back inside the Butler. And now Stone. I don't think we've seen as much of Stone and Jensen as maybe we would have liked. Young. This man's done his job. .27 minutes of cup football remaining for 78. Stone. But everywhere they go, the Dragons are swarmed over by upwards of 2 Roosters. As Reddy gets his kick in and finding touch just on the eastern suburb side of halfway.
Although I did think there was more thrust and drive in the St George players that brought the ball up.
Yes, but there wasn't any support for them each time. There were 3 play the balls there, Keith, where the forwards ran through with not another forward within 2 or 3 metres to take the pass if they broke the line.
Dempsey calling the scrum down again, and St George win it. It's out with Prodgett. Fulton swarming over the opposite number 6.
Yes, but Ed's starting to give them a bit of possession, isn't he now?
Grant. Tackled by Hastings. Craig Young. Robert Finch. And that's Graham Quinn. Craig Young again. Edge. Did well to take that pass. I don't think that he knew it was coming, and it was a little bit hard anyway. Carney. Ready. Almost completely blotted from the game, Rod Reddy.
He hasn't made a break yet, has he? He's been put on the deck every time as soon as he's had the ball.
Mullins has it for Eastern Suburbs, following a very, very ordinary attempt at finding touch. Roy Saylor. Tackled by another member of that 74 schoolboy side, Craig Young. O'Reilly. Hastings with the tackle count resuming, and Hastings looking to split St George. Stevens. Back to Mountier. Fulton. Aleph, Fulton. Now with Mackay.
That was the difference there between Fulton and a lot of other players. The pass wasn't on to Harris coming through on the burst, and rather than risk the pass going astray, Fulton hung on to it.
Carried back by Hastings, and I thought he was offside.
I thought he was offside, yes.
In fact, I think he almost certainly was, but it's gone in to touch that grub kick, and it's a magnificent kick, finding about 45 metres with the minimum of effort.
George will need to win this one. Edge has won the 2 scrums that he's been backed in so far since he came onto the field.
And Stephen Edge has won it again. Carney. Driven by Hastings.
They've had a good duel, those two, haven't they?
Hastings just a little in front, I'd say, Keith.
Sorodini looking in vain, as so many of his colleagues have done tonight, to find any semblance of a gap through the eastern suburb side. Hasn't been there, and the way they're playing, it doesn't look like presenting itself. Ready. That might be the way to break them, says Reddy as it goes back to Hastings. So again, possession with the eastern suburb side, leading 14 points to 4. 2 converted tries, in the lead with 23 minutes of time remaining. Fulton, Mossman. Eastern suburb won the Cup in 1975. They went on to win the Premiership in the same year, proving that it can be done. This was O'Reilly. Of all the sides that have contested 5 years of Cup football, the side in possession of the ball now have been by far the most successful. Mackay. Fulton. There it goes again. Disappearing through the lights. Knocked back down, and it was Stevens. Eastern Suburbs onto the attack, but it's St George getting off the hook, and away goes Finch.
They're beautifully placed kicks of Fulton's, aren't they? They go just where he wants them to go.
Inside the 5 against Eastern Suburbs.
There hasn't been anything in this game, of course, when you take that first 15 minutes out of it, when St George, East hit away to that 10 points to nil lead. So we're looking at the remainder of the game. It's 4 points each, isn't it?
Right.
Without a try being scored. It's taken St George a long while to recover from that initial setback.
Stone, Young, Carney. Young, Trudgett, Jensen, Quinn. Good football by St George there. Craig Young calling for it quickly. That's him with it. Out to Carney. Out to Reddy. Did well to get a pass to Butler. Ducks under O'Reilly, but then runs into Mullins and also Mossman.
I'll tell you what, they hit him hard too.
Butler gingerly getting to his feet. Reddy, Young, popping it up to Jansen.
There's not a man in that Eastern Suburbs shirking his duty in defence, though, is there?
I've never seen better defence than Eastern Suburbs bring out here tonight.
Reddy has put them all onside, but Schubert's up in a la Barassi fashion. Schubert's hurt too, I think, in that taking of that kick.
That's a clever kick by Fulton.
And I think it's going to find touches it. Yes, it took a right-hand turn. Knowing that he had the entire St George side up after that bomb, which was taken so well by Schubert, and knowing that Butler is on the ground injured on the far side of the field, Fulton has put that down just outside the 22 line, and there's the scrum forming.
And it was a dangerous situation too, because Fairfax summed it up, and he was on the burst. He was flying down there.
He would have been in a lot of trouble up there.
My word.
It's a very groggy Stephen Butler still on the ground receiving attention as St George win another scrum, and Stephen Edge is getting them plenty of ball to do something with, but that's the big thing that has evaded them tonight. Unable to breach this defence. Rocklight from Eastern Suburbs. Young. Back to Sorodimi. Three-quarter time siren sounding. Damsey indicates that he's heard it. And at three-quarter time, with 20 minutes of the Amco Cup football final coming your way, it's 14-4, Eastern Suburbs in the lead. Just repeating the three-quarter time score, Eastern Suburbs 14, leading St George 4. Let's press on with how you see this cup final at the moment. And 14-4, 2 converted tries, and I haven't seen any comeback at all from St George. It's just been as dominant by East as it was in the first half.
Yes, but St George will have to do in this last quarter what East did in the first quarter, and that's score 2 converted tries to get near them. As Keith had mentioned earlier, there's not that much between them since that first quarter, but I still feel that Eastern Suburbs have been the better side on the run of play. They've made the fewer mistakes, and of course with those pinpointing kicks of Fulton, St George are just frustrated.
Well, Keith, can I ask you this question? Harry Bath is down there at the moment lecturing the St George side. What would you be saying if you were the coach of St George at the moment?
I'd be making sure that I played it down in Eastern Suburbs territory. Edge is getting possession of the scrums. He's been on there now for some 15 or 20 minutes or so, and he's won the only 4 scrums. And I thought St George looked a lot more positive in that third quarter than at any other time in the game. Certainly the Eastern Suburbs defence has held, and held particularly well, but at least there's been a few chinks there that St George have breached their defence on a couple of occasions. Certainly they haven't made a great deal of ground, but their only opportunity, I feel, is to turn around and get down in Eastern Suburbs territory and attack from there, and I think they've got to be hitting up the middle of the rucks, bringing those long driving kicks down, and attempting to get down in here, because they're not going to win the game from up in their own territory, because the Eastern Suburbs defence is just too good.
That's right. It's the only tactic possible in these circumstances, because number one, Edge is winning the scrum. Well, now, for them to do any good, they must be in Eastern Suburbs side of halfway, so they've got to blast it down there all the time.
Okay, Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes with their three-quarter time summing up. In a moment, the final quarter.
Is he?
No.
He's a 5-8.
St. George with the 20 minutes of time to come back from down 14-4.
Looks like a couple of changes, Ray, or one in particular. Pomfret looks as if he's on, with Sorodini going back to fullback, and Butler's off.
Yeah.
And it's a penalty going to Eastern Suburbs. And indiscretion in the tackle. Fairfax coming up to take the kick for line. So it's Sorodini, you say, dropping back to fullback. And Pomfret
on the wing
has gone onto the wing. So I think both those fellows come from a French background. So this would, well, it's certainly the first time in Amco Cup football that this has happened. It has happened with St. George before, though. Mark Harris now taking it down centre field, and it was a very, very desperate tackle that eventually ended that progress from Trudgett. O'Reilly, Stevens, Power, now Schubert beating Brennan and going back in field, and Schubert to play it just outside the 22. Official attendance tonight, 18,050. 18,050 here at Leichhardt to see the 78 Cup final. Mackay. And so again it's Eastern Suburbs down in this range for the up and under by Fulton. Maldiga. Playing it back to Hastings. This is the last, and it'll go to Fulton. There he is. And there goes the up and under. And Carney has it, but for a moment I thought Sorodini was going to come straight across the top of the halfback and knock him out of the way.
Yes, well, they've kept him inside their own goal line too, so it's a goal line dropout. Of course, East now retained possession, Frank.
Oh, yes.
It was very important, that one, wasn't it?
Starkey's going on the field too.
After the full-time whistle tonight, we'll have the presentations of the Man of the Match Award, the Superstar Award, and the Golden Try announcement for the players on the field, and most importantly, the presentation to the winning captain of the 78 Cup champion and his speech in reply. More on that in just a moment of what's going to happen after the full-time siren. Here's Mullins, just outside the 22. Back to Royce Ayliffe.
He's had a strong game tonight, Ayliffe, too.
He certainly has.
Playing it back to Schubert. On to Hastings. Penalty to East. That's more than likely the ball game. It's against Craig Young. Starkey going on in 17 and replacing Craig Young. Penalty to East.
A little bit surprising because I thought Young had a top game out there this evening. Yes. Looks as if he's carrying an arm, though. Could he be carrying an arm or a shoulder?
Well, that shot of him indicates that he might be. Just tidying up the after full-time siren happenings, following the awards that I told you about, we'll then be announcing the draw for the very exciting $100,000 Challenge Cup starting next week on Channel 10. That competition will run for 4 weeks and will include 8 Sydney Premiership teams made up of the 7 clubs missing the semi-final and the 8th team being the club knocked out of the preliminary semi-final. That draw will be announced following the presentations tonight. Stevens has kicked 4 goals from as many attempts, is it?
4 from 4, yes.
And right in front, he makes it 5 out of 5. 16 points to 4. Eastern Suburbs looking very much like the 78 Cup champions, and they'll become the first side to win 2 cups. And of course tonight, $60,000. Quite a good deal more than it was back in 75 when they first took it out. The ball is back to St. George, but Dancy is ruling that the ball went down, forward. Crowd voicing the disapproval on the far side.
Only the St. George supporters, I'd say, voicing the disapproval, right?
This is Lee Pomfret. Tunny.
No excuses really for St George up to this stage because they've had a surfeit of possession, haven't they?
Certainly, but they can't clear it from the base of the scrum there, Keith. They've been caught time and time again. Either the 5'8" or the halfback particularly, and the 5'8" too.
Ready. Budget. Back to Stone. Put to ground by Fulton. He's been everywhere tonight, Fulton, in attack and defence. And there's a penalty he's given away. Ready will take the kick for line.
Yes, he's got to know. There's no point in taking the 2 points.
14 minutes out. Not a good kick by Reddy. He's only gained about 3 metres.
The quietest game I've seen from Reddy this year.
Yes, well, he hasn't had too many opportunities as far as he's concerned. Of course, they've been really sweating on him.
Stuckey. Swinging it back to the blind side to Reddy. And that's what he's been faced with. Upwards of 2, sometimes 3. Stuckey giving it to Grant. Chunny. Pradgett. The dummy, and then to Finch. Wheeling his way out of a tackle to Pomfret. Stone. Getting it back to Starkey.
Put it back well, too.
Last tackle for the Saints. Pomfret. Crossfield bomb, but too deep.
Well, the idea was certainly right, but it was nowhere near as well directed as those pinpoint bombs of full force.
Incidentally, the 2 winners for the Ava CTC Cruises tonight are Mrs. Boyle, the first winner with 36092 of Brightonley Sands, and the other, the main prize to J. Sheehan or Shern of Shallow Rush at Parks. That's the big prize going to Mr. or Mrs. Shern. Fulton.
Fulton has been well contained, you know, in general play, hasn't he? Apart from that one break that he made, but his directing of play and his tactical kicking, of course, has been the feature of the game.
And that break was from a dummy half position.
The dummy half position, that's right.
Stevens. We're Aylett now. With Harris. Around his opposite number. He's got Schubert coming up on the flank. There's Schubert, but wrestled into touch by Brennan. Harris and Schubert having a quick chat.
Yes, well, Harris was a victim of circumstances. He did the right thing and appeared to draw Brennan in, but there was certainly no yardage for Schubert to work in, and Brennan did well to get across as quickly as he did, didn't he?
Yes,
but Harris was picked up on the inside anyway.
There was also cover coming.
He was picked up, and that gave Brennan that yard to get to Schubert.
Penalty going to St George, feet across against Mountier.
Hart and Mountier there shaking his head in disgust. But Hooker is never wrong, is he, Frank?
I think Danzy's had a top game here tonight as a referee.
Stephen Edge up to take the tap. George Grant asked to go forward.
Grant there was the only St George player running onto that ball, and that's been typical of them right throughout.
Starkey. Jansen. Jansen with a strong run for St George.
Yeah, great tackle by Hastings again.
Cunny. Ready. Pradgett. Oh, gee. Quinn was almost put through the gap.
They're throwing everything into this finish, Frank.
That's right, yes, but it's typical of them. Right, they're almost, but not quite. Right throughout the night.
Harris. Fulton. Down to Sorodini and Pomfret. Sorodini with a neat run. Stuckey out to Reddy. Back on the inside to Brennan, but that's going to be forward or offside. Yes, it's an intentional forward pass. And I tell you what, he's not wrong, Dancy. Torpedoing that ball out into the crowd. Scoring a try earlier in the night. Zali Beaton. Tripped out against the winter chills. As Mullins plays it. 18 metres up through Hastings to Fulton and then to O'Reilly, and the big man goes charging ahead to another big man in the shape of Harris. Trudgett was the tackler. Fulton from dummy half. Just a couple of metres out. O'Reilly might go himself, but Hastings is calling for it. O'Reilly does go himself. Held up by St. George. Played back to Mountier. And this was the last tackle coming up for them. Fulton indicates the bomb. O'Reilly back to Fulton. There it goes into the in-goal area. Sorodimi rakes it out in Fairfax fashion. Well, if Eastern Suburbs play this type of football on Sunday against Manly, we could be destined for playoff after playoff to sort out the final five in the Premiership. And this man will have a very big influence on the match against his old team. Fulton. Mullins. Mackay. Grant Hedger is getting ready on the touchline to come on for Eastern Suburbs. O'Reilly. Hastings. Feeling he's going to get that super stuff. O'Reilly. Schubert! Schubert! Still going! Is he there? Short!
No, he's just short. But what a great break.
Out to Mossman. Floating it out to Harris. That could be a great pass, but a good tackle by Grant.
He only had to get the ball away to Mullins. Unmarked over there, wasn't he?
East now. Fulton. It's there again. Fairfax rates it down. O'Reilly scooping it away to Schubert. Schubert now towards the corner. He beats one. He beats two. And Schubert scores. The referee Dancy has called play back.
He's been there for a while.
Schubert with a smile on his face.
That pass by O'Reilly.
Yes, it was. He's had a good, strong game this evening, Bob O'Reilly, and figured in a lot of the heavy work.
Fairfax offside is the ruling. Well, my eyes floated along with the ball, and it was going to be a good try by Schubert, and as Frank Hyde said, the man responsible was undoubtedly Bob O'Reilly, but Fairfax was ruled offside by referee Dancy.
Bob O'Reilly has been replaced with Hedger going on. And they'd say he'd get the plaudits of his coach for a job well done.
Stone picked up and thrust back. Stuckey. Six minutes of the cup final remaining as Reddy moves up and again is greeted by three Eastern Suburbs players. Stuckey down to Sorodini.
Good tackle, Hastings. Jeez, some work this.
Pomfret, Cunny, Reddy. On his outside is Stone. Pomfret. That's going out on the full. scrum to go down about 10 metres on the St George side of halfway. Number 15 going out for Eastern Suburbs now.
Terry Murphy.
Terry Murphy not long back from an injury that has really kept him out of the 1978 season. And a very valued player.
Replacing Power.
Penalty to Eastern Suburbs. Incorrect feed by Carney. Now the timepiece here at Leichhardt has been stopped at the 5-minute mark. Hastings to take the tap. Hedger coming on the burst. Stevens calling for it. There's Stevens. Picked up nicely. Hardy Beatson has opted to send his other two replacements out. They're getting ready on the touchline. And from dummy half goes Mackay. Mackay gets it back to Hedger. And Hedger must be very close. Hastings to dummy half. Shoots it out to Fulton. Pot shot for field goal, or drop goal. And it's Robert Stone coming away.
A lot of heroes out there in that Eastern Suburbs side, Frank, hasn't there?
Not the least of them is Harris, too. He's had a top game. It's Mal Connor and Paul Jeffs are waiting to go on for Eastern Suburbs. And they're itching, too. They've got to get on there quickly after being for the kill.
Penalty to St George. Somebody sounding a dummy siren in the background. Two replacements on. That's the hold-up. That's just advising referee Danzy. And Arthur Mountier, who's done a magnificent job for his team, not only tonight but right through the series, has come off with Michael Mossman as Reddy finds the touchline. And the free kick to be taken by Edge and given to Grant. Stone. That's what happens when Stone meets granite, and that's really what this Eastern Suburbs defence has been tonight. A granite-like wall. As Reddy has put the ground, and it's Hastings for Eastern Suburbs, scampering through two tackles. Magnificent game, Kevin Hastings. Grant Hedger. $16 points to 4. Inside the last 5 minutes. Fulton. Harris. Fairfax was coming on that ball very quickly, and Terry Murphy was on his outside. Stevens to Fulton. Hastings coming from an onside position. He's got the ball! Juggling it and taking it to ground. Connor. Fulton. Chance for the tricolours here. Stevens back to Mackay. Mackay will play it back to Mal Connor. On in 16 for the red, white and blues. Fairfax wants it. That's him. Cuts out about 3 to Hastings. On it goes now to Royce Ailiff, and he's into touch.
They're finishing strong, aren't they? Eastern Suburbs, their defence has withstood everything that St George could throw at them, and now they're really opening up an attack. They hit St George with that early onslaught, rattling up 10 points in the first 15 minutes, with Fulton putting the first one on the board by Kevin Hastings at the 9th minute, and now it's been all Eastern Suburbs in the last 10 minutes of the game.
St George winning the scrum, and Carney is tackled. Don't forget, after the Amco Cup replay tonight, you'll see the final of the Amco Shield between Padua College of Brisbane and Fairfield Patrician Brothers of Sydney. St George now with the ball. 10 metres out from their own try line, and it's Reddy.
Well, we said last week when Reddy fires, St George fires, but unfortunately he's been well contained this evening, and St George very flat.
I must concede to you, Keith, you tipped Eastern Suburbs, and they did just exactly as you said. Their tackling, their defence has been the feature of this game tonight.
Unfortunately, Frank, it wasn't a very confident prediction.
St. George now, with Jensen saying, let's get out of here, but blotted down by Schubert. Referee Dempsey taking it over to the 22, as coming from the field is Robert Stone for St. George. And there's the siren. The cup final is over. Eastern Suburbs have won their second with a 16 points to 4 victory over the Dragons of St. George. Well, there they are, Eastern Suburbs, the heroes of tonight in their Amco Cup final by 16 points to 4. Artie Beetson, the coach, going out to meet his players now. Bobby Fulton, one of the real stars of the game, playing in his first cup for 1978, his first cup match. Artie Beetson in there somewhere. And very, very colourful scenes here at Leichhardt. We'll take a break and come back in just a moment to join down on the dais John Brennan for the 78 Amco Cup presentations.
The cry let everybody know. If you play this football game, beware the Roosters crow. They're great to see in action. These boys will show the way. Put the Roosters on the field, they'll show you how to play.
Welcome now to the presentation of the 1978 Amco Cup, the $250,000 competition, and tonight, Easts are champions. And now I'd like to ask the skipper of Eastern Suburbs, Bobby Fulton, to come forward and accept the prestigious Amco Cup and the cheque for $60,000, Bobby.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Bobby Fulton.
Oh, the dog.
And here he comes. The proud man tonight, Bobby Fulton. Good on you, mate. Tremendous. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to ask Mr. Cliff Vincent Jr., Managing Director of Amco Holdings, to present to Bob and his teammates the cup and the cheque. Mr. Vincent. Mr. Vincent. There he is.
Great. Congratulations, Bobby. A great game. I'd like to congratulate both sides on treating us to a great game of football. Really great game. Bob, there it is. 60,000. Fortunately, it wasn't included in the budget last night, so it's still 60. Good luck.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Vincent. I'd like to thank Amco and Channel 10 for making this competition possible. It's a fine event, and it can only get better. I'd like to get our captain coach up here now, Arthur Beetson. On behalf of the East players, I'd like to thank Arthur for the efforts that he's put into us throughout the season. He's got us playing the right type of football, obviously, to win this type of game. I would also like to thank my teammates on a great effort tonight. I'd also like to thank St. George. Although losers, they put up a fine effort and played rugby league in the right tradition. Again, I'd like to thank all the supporters for coming along here tonight, and especially the East supporters. Thank you. Let's go.
That's it. That's probably the most popular quinella in all of Australia, Bobby Fulton and Artie Beetson. Thank you, fellas.
Hold it up,
Straight through there, huh? Bob?
Hold up,
good man. The boys taking the cup down to the team members of the champion team of East. The winner now of the National Match Award tonight, and more importantly, gaining 3 points in the Superstar Award, and therefore, more importantly further still, enough points to become the 1978 Singapore Airlines Superstar, and so following the path of Graham O'Grady is Kevin Hastings of East. Top go, Kev. Good boy. There he is. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask to come forward Mr. John Pyle, Sales Manager for Singapore Airlines. The award of 3 weeks, Kev, on the continent, the United Kingdom and Singapore with Singapore Airlines, and the Escape Kings from Air Tours of Australia. Mr. John Pyle. John?
Of course, against the ground, running around every thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Yeah, my word.
I'd like to thank Amco, Channel 10, Singapore Airlines, and National, and also my 12 teammates who played tonight. Thanks very much.
Kevin Hastings, superstar, 1978, but didn't he have a top game tonight? Good boy, Kev. So I'd ask the boys if you wouldn't mind stepping on forward to collect your personal medallions. A great take-on of tonight. Artie, Bob, if you can lead them forward. And I'd ask Mr. Dick Dunn, Vice President of the New South Wales Rugby Football League, to make the presentation. Bobby Faulkner, first of all, you're watching up the players, right? Dick Dunn. Hang on just a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, before presenting the medallions to the boys, I congratulate both teams for a magnificent game of rugby league. They showed us tonight how rugby league can and should be played. I'd like to congratulate Eastern Suburbs on winning the Amco Cup on the second occasion. Congratulations.
Dick.
Pass them over. Bobby, good work. Great work, son. Kevin, great work, son. Billy, congratulations, mate. Good, congratulations. Royce, congratulations. Kevin, great win. Arthur, congratulations. Congratulations, Dan Mecca. Great game. Congratulations, Russell. Good boy. Congratulations, Bob. Smile, Bob. Congratulations, Watson. Congratulations. Congratulations, Ian. Good boy. Congratulations, son, on a great win. Congratulations. Congratulations, my boy. Congratulations. Congratulations. What about Arthur? Hey, Arthur!
I think, Dick.
Congratulations, mate. Great work.
Dick Dunn and the last recipient, Artie Beetson. And I might mention there are also personal medallions for tonight's token to Jack Dancy standing over there and the two linesmen. You'll be receiving them very, very shortly, Jack. Ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance. Ray, would you like to take it back in the box?
Thank you very much, John. As Eastern Suburbs assemble now to do their victory lap of honour for the second time in the 5-year history of the Amco Cup. Winners in 1975, and as I said during the commentary, by far the most successful side that has contested the 5-year history of the Amco. And so Artie Beetson leads his players down through a swarm of youngsters there to greet them as they set off on what might be a rather difficult lap of honour. And it leads me into saying thank you to Frank Hyde and Keith Barnes for their co-commentary tonight. Keith for everything right through the 1978 Cup. A very warm thank you.
It's been great, Ray, and Eastern Suburbs were the champions, aren't they? They played particularly well this evening, and it's a credit to Arthur Beetson.
And to Frank Hyde, it's been an absolute pleasure, but more so a thrill, to work with the greatest of them all. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. I consider it a great honour. I really do, and to see the difficulties under which you work, you know, it amazes me. And let me commend you on what you've done throughout the years with the Amco Cup, because, and believe me, I think the only fellow that I know who could do it.
Frank, just going quickly down the statistics, the final tally, of course, going to the Eastern Suburbs side by a decisive margin. Do you think that they were entitled to win by such a big margin?
Yes, I think that right from the start of this game they put the pressure on. They didn't release it at any stage during the 4 quarters. They were awarded in the early part of the game by a little bit of enterprise with Bob Fulton's kicking, and they got a lead and hung on to it, and that's what this game is all about.
Okay, Frank, thank you very much. We'll come back in just a moment with, of course, the all-important draw for the $100,000 Challenge Cup.
The Eastern Suburbs team.